Here on CBC News Network, where the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, addressed the Canadian Parliament in her first visit to Canada as President of the European Commission, saying that hard times, referring to the war in Ukraine, saying hard times reveal true friends, and this is what Canada and the EU are, true friends, that Canada has gone above and beyond the call of duty in Ukraine and its support of Ukraine, well beyond your fair share. Also saying that Canada is a natural partner of the European Union because of shared values, and saying that the war in Ukraine is not just a war on human rights, but a war on women's rights, and that we have a duty to show women and girls what a world of fair chances looks like. The CBC's Karina Roman was watching von der Leyen's address, and she joins us now from the foyer of the House of Commons. So let's start with the content of her speech. Karina, what was the overarching message?
Well, really, it was a glowing sort of account of what a great partner Canada is to Europe, what a great country Canada is, how much we have in common with Europe, whether we're talking about the fact that so many people in Canada have roots in Europe in terms of ancestors, or in terms of partnerships in the world wars and how we helped. It was really notable when she talked about the Second World War, especially when she herself acknowledged that she is of German descent, and how Nazism and fascism was what brought things to a head and almost destroyed, Europe, and how Canada, as part of the Allies, basically helped free, Europe in that war. And so, that was quite notable. But also, as you mentioned, Andrew, the Canada punching above its weight in Ukraine. And I'm going to play a clip for you of where she talked about how, even before some Europeans, back in 2014, when Russia first invaded Ukraine, that Canada seemed to recognize how significant this was by, pretty much immediately launching this training mission of training Ukrainian soldiers in Poland. And she addressed that in her speech. Have a listen to what she had to say.
Ukraine's resistance has stunned the world. That was primarily, of course, because of the courage of the Ukrainian people. But it was also, and crucially, because of the professionalism of the Ukrainian soldiers, many trained by Canada. And I cannot overstate this. Canada has saved Ukrainians in the first days.
So that's a pretty glowing, view of Canada's role there, and she of course went on to thank Canada for that, and all the people involved in that operation, which today was announced to be extended at least until October. She also talked about Canada's role in helping Europe wean itself off Russian energy and natural gas, to be particular, because of course that has been part of the effort as well, and that while Canada increased production to help with global supply, it meant that Europe could, slowly wean itself off of Russian gas, and that was a big factor as well. And this going forward as well, of course, talking about what still needs to be done going forward, that although all of this has been over the years and decades, that there is still more for the future. And I just, in terms of the glowing words, she almost ended with, that Canada is a country of, tradition and innovation, where who you are, how you pray, or who you love, people are free to do that however they want. She makes Canada sound like a pretty great place, to be honest, and how she said that is her vision for Europe as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was certainly interesting to hear how glowing her words were, and the idea that Canada has gone well beyond your fair share. It's not something that Canadians always hear when it comes to military support or otherwise. But how significant is it for the head of the European Union to address the Canadian Parliament?
Well, it's very significant in terms of, historical, but also on the eve of International Women's Day, having the first woman President of the European Commission be the one to address Parliament. And you know, she talked about women and their role in the world, whether we're talking about the women in Iran, or you know, Ukrainian women, or women in Canada or in Europe, just basically how important it is that, you know, women's rights are human rights, but just in terms of how that also is a strength of democracy. And in terms of democracy, how she talked about, you know, Canada, well, all democracies are not perfect, but they are perfectible. I thought that was an interesting turn of phrase as well. And so I think it's significant in terms of the fact as well that the war in Ukraine is now, we're past a year's point here, and I think there is some concern about waning support, and we haven't seen it yet, but part of her message and part of her reason for being here is to shore up support going forward, because I don't think anyone doubts that this war isn't going to last quite a bit longer. And so it's important that, you know, the effort, especially by countries like Canada, but others who's perhaps stretched to the limit now in terms of what we've given militarily, monetarily, we're not the only ones who might feel stretched on that it's important that, you know, as she said, that, you know, we will not give up, we will not stop supporting Ukraine until, you know, the very end. And that message is important because I think there is concern that as time goes on, that support may wane. But I think it's also important that it is the eve of International Women's Day, because she's definitely a strong example of female leadership in this world.
Karina, thank you. The CBC's Karina Roman live in Ottawa.